A man bought a lottery ticket at a convenience store while filling up his car. He was not a regular player. He bought it because the jackpot had passed $300 million. The next morning, he checked the numbers and realized his life had just changed forever. After federal and state taxes, he took home $113 million. Now, answer me honestly, what would you do with that money if you were the winner? Think carefully and answer sincerely. Would you buy a house, maybe a luxury car, lavish trips, live like a king, make some kind of investments? Because that is roughly the mental script everyone builds when imagining that scenario. Most people believe they know the answer, but what actually happens to those who genuinely receive that amount is far more complicated than any mental simulation. Today, I am going to show you what can happen to lottery winners, the real arithmetic of the prize, how some fortunes evaporate within a few years when things go wrong, and what the rare cases of wealth preservation did differently. At the end, I will detail the practical steps for the case that one day you receive more money than you are used to managing, because even if the probability of hitting all the numbers is 1 in 300 million, understanding this mechanism is useful for anyone who receives an unexpected sum. Inheritance, sale of property, significant compensation, an unusual bonus. The mechanism of destruction is always the same. But first, let us understand what that money really represents. Because most people have never done this calculation, and without it, it is impossible to understand what happens afterward. With the current rate on American Treasury bonds, around 4.5% per year, 113 million invested conservatively yields approximately $5,085,000 per year in gross returns. Subtract income tax and roughly 4 million net remains annually. Now divide by 12. That gives $333,000 per month, more than $300,000 coming into the account every month, without working, without significant risk, without any complexity. Just investing in a safe instrument and waiting. And while that money comes in monthly, the principal remains untouched. It does not shrink and it is not consumed. It continues generating $333,000 the following month, and the next, and the next, and that amount grows. This means that whoever invested the prize conservatively is receiving that sum for the rest of their existence. And when they pass away, the principal goes to the children, who will also receive it for the rest of their lives. It is wealth that perpetuates itself across generations with a single correct decision. It seems impossible to go wrong with that volume of money, right? Yet in many documented cases, it does go wrong, and the reason runs deeper than simple irresponsibility. When people imagine winning the lottery, the mental script follows a predictable pattern: a paid-off home, 1 or 2 new cars, a trip to that destination that always remained a dream, paying off the parents' debts, renovating the mother's house, helping the sibling going through difficulty, maybe opening that business that never got off the ground. None of that is wrong in itself. The problem is not in the desires. The problem is in what does not appear on that list. Nobody imagines the pressure that begins when people discover you have money. Nobody imagines the relentless flow of requests, proposals, and business opportunities that appear from nowhere. Nobody imagines how difficult it is to refuse help to someone you genuinely care about and who genuinely needs it. And nobody imagines that when the fortune disappears, it is rarely because of one single large and obvious mistake. It is because of a sequence of decisions that, one by one, seemed perfectly reasonable. When wealth dissolves, it always happens in phases, and each phase seems sensible when you are inside it. The first phase is euphoria. When the money hits the account, the natural reaction is to materialize everything that has been waiting an entire lifetime. The house you always wanted, the car you always desired, the trip you could never take. And then comes the family. Paying off the parents' debt, renovating the mother's house, helping those in need, and so on. This is not irresponsibility. It is important to show affection to the people we love. This is what any decent person would do under the same circumstances. However, adding it all up, the $900,000 house, the $120,000 car, the $40,000 trip, the family renovations, the gifts, the celebrations. It is perfectly possible to spend between 1 and 2 million in just the first months without a single, clearly mistaken decision. There will still be plenty of money left, yes, certainly. But that was only the beginning. The tap opened and closing it becomes increasingly difficult. The second phase is social pressure. From the moment the people around you, and not always those close to you, discover that you have money, a process begins that is difficult to describe for those who have never experienced it. Relatives with stories of need who urgently require money, friends with projects that need capital, acquaintances with business ideas that just need an initial push. People you barely knew who suddenly appear as if they were your childhood best friend, and the pressure does not always come from bad intentions. Many times it comes from people you genuinely care about and who really do need help, and then it becomes much more complicated to refuse everyone. You have it, they need it. Refusing seems almost inhumane, and that will weigh on you psychologically. So, the person does not refuse everything. They lend here, help there, put money into some project at someone's request. And in 2 years of constant pressure, without a single decision that seemed wrong at the moment it was made, it is possible to have transferred hundreds of thousands or even millions to the people who asked. And there is a painful detail in this equation. When you lend money to a friend or family member, in most cases that money does not come back. And along with the money goes the relationship, because asking for repayment generates resentment. When you ask for it back, you lose the money and still become the villain of the story, so it is extremely complicated. The third phase is the disastrous business decision. With now smaller but still substantial capital, the desire arises to make the money truly produce returns. Not just leave everything earning on a Treasury bond. You want to build something, to venture out, to create a genuinely profitable business. And then the proposals arrive. A restaurant in a tourist city, an established franchise, a real estate venture, an app, a partner with an idea that seems solid. The problem is that entrepreneurship is difficult for anyone, and more than half of new businesses do not survive the first 5 years. Whoever has capital but does not yet have the business experience to evaluate a project clearly can become the perfect target for proposals that do not hold up, whether through good faith or bad. And when the business fails, another slice of the wealth goes. Sometimes $100,000, sometimes $500,000, sometimes more, depending on the size of the loss. The combination of these three phases, euphoria, social pressure, and disastrous business decisions, is the mechanism by which a fortune can simply disappear in a few years. Not all at once, but gradually, in decisions that individually seem to make sense. The United States has documented cases that illustrate this process in a striking way. In 1988, a man named William Post had exactly $2.46 in his bank account. He lived on a disability benefit and had no steady job. He pawned a ring for $40 and used the money to buy lottery tickets. One of them hit all the numbers and yielded a prize of $16.2 million. Overnight, the man who had no money even for food began flaunting a mansion, boats, motorcycles, luxury cars, and large television sets. Within 3 months, he already owed $500,000 to creditors. His landlady sued him, demanding a third of the prize. His own brother hired a professional hitman to eliminate him and take the money. He was arrested for assaulting someone with a shotgun. In the end, he declared bankruptcy. He sold the rights to the remaining installments of the prize for a fraction of the value. In his final years, he survived again on a monthly assistance check, $450 per month. He died in 2006 with approximately $1 million in debt. In an interview, he summed it all up in one sentence: "I wish it never happened. It was a complete nightmare." Another case, perhaps the most emblematic in American history, involves a businessman who was already a millionaire before winning the lottery. On Christmas Eve of 2002, he bought a ticket that hit all the numbers of a $314.9 million prize. After taxes, he took $113 million home, He already owned a successful construction company, had 17 million in assets, and decades of business experience. Most people believed that he, of all people, would be able to manage the fortune. What happened was the opposite. He began giving generously, which attracted an avalanche of requests. In interviews, he recounted that in any public place, hundreds of people would approach him asking for money. He was robbed twice in the parking lot of a nightclub, first $545,000 in cash, then another $200,000. His teenage granddaughter, to whom he gave thousands of dollars in cash and an unlimited credit card, fell into substance dependency and was found dead at 17. His daughter died a few years later. The marriage collapsed, the house caught fire and had no insurance. He stated in an interview, "I basically lost everything that was important to me in my life. I wish I had torn up that ticket." There is a scientific explanation for part of this process. In 1978, a group of researchers published a study that became a reference in psychology. They followed 22 American lottery winners for 18 months. The result was surprising. At first, intense euphoria, as expected. The winners reported feeling on top of the world. But within 18 months, the satisfaction levels had returned to the same point as before the prize. In addition, the winners began to extract less pleasure from everyday experiences, such as a good meal, a pleasant song, a conversation with a friend. These things that once provided genuine satisfaction began to provide less because the internal reference point had risen. This phenomenon is called hedonic adaptation. The human brain adjusts to new circumstances, whether positive or negative, and returns to its emotional baseline. The implicit promise of the lottery, win and be happy forever, does not work the way people imagine. Money transforms many things in life, but the brain recalibrates along with it. And what does this have to do with losing a fortune? Practically everything. Because when satisfaction adapts to the new level, it demands more stimulation, and the natural response to that demand is to spend more. Each new acquisition provides a temporary euphoria. The brain adapts, and the person seeks the next acquisition. It is a cycle that, without a conscious limit, consumes wealth from within. There is another dimension of this problem that almost no one mentions. A businessman who accumulates millions over 30 years does not only gain money in the process, he gains the capacity to evaluate risk. He learns to identify a trustworthy partner, knows when to turn down a bad proposal, and has a network of lawyers, accountants, and consultants he has tested over decades. This is called human capital, and it comes inseparable from financial capital for those who build wealth organically over time. The lottery winner receives the same financial volume, but does not receive the human capital that normally accompanies someone who accumulates that wealth. Overnight, the person has the money, but does not have the tools to manage it. It is like handing a high-performance race car to someone who has never driven in their life. The vehicle is real, but the skill to handle it is not. And on a high-speed track, the absence of skill does not produce merely a mediocre result. It produces an accident. This is precisely why cases of wealth preservation among winners are rarely stories of brilliant investment decisions. They are stories of people who recognized this gap, who understood that they had the money, but not the equipment, and who delegated decisions to those who had the competence. Obviously, they delegated to trustworthy people. So let us talk about what works. What you can do if you receive a significant sum of money, whether lottery winnings, an inheritance, the sale of a business, or any other unexpected event. First step, do not tell anyone immediately. It seems counterintuitive. Receiving a fortune is cause for celebration, not secrecy. But silence buys time. Time for the euphoria to subside, to understand the new context, to build a structure before the requests start coming in. Because they will come. The question is whether you will or will not be prepared when that happens. Second step, do not make any significant decision for at least 6 months. You can pay off all your debts, that is sensible, but do not launch any business, do not acquire any investment property, and do not lend anything to third parties. Stay quiet for months. Put the money in a conservative and safe investment, earning, growing, with no major moves. Those 6 months are not inertia. They are the smartest possible decision because the worst financial choices are made in the emotional heat of the moment, and the first months after a prize are the worst time for any important decision. Third step, hire an independent fiduciary financial advisor. Not the manager at the bank where you claimed the prize. The manager works for the bank. He offers you the products available at that institution and has commercial targets to hit. To deal with a fortune of this size, look for a fiduciary advisor who is legally required to place the client's interests above their own. The incentives are completely different. This professional acts as a filter between you and the decisions that can cost you dearly. He screens business proposals, evaluates the risk you cannot see because you do not yet have the experience for it, and charges for management, not for product sold. There is a financial rule that appears consistently among those who preserve significant wealth. It is called the 4% rule. The logic is this: you invest the total amount and use no more than 4% of the wealth per year to live on. This rule was validated by an academic study that analyzed decades of American market data and concluded that a withdrawal rate of 4% per year allows the wealth to survive for at least 30 years, even through periods of crisis. With 113 million invested, 4% per year represents $4,520,000, $376,000 per month to spend, to live on, to do whatever you wish. And if the portfolio yields between 6 and 10% per year, which is the historically common scenario for a diversified portfolio in the United States, withdrawing only 4% means the wealth continues growing even with the annual withdrawals. You live off the fruit without felling the tree. The wealth is the trunk, the returns are the fruit. If you consume only the fruit, the tree remains standing, produces more fruit every year for decades, for your entire life, and for the lives of your children. But if you start cutting pieces of the trunk, spending the principal, the tree weakens, and at a certain point it simply no longer exists. That is exactly what happened in the cases where people collapsed. They did not spend only the returns. They began cutting the trunk without realizing it. Well, they did realize it, but they never imagined the money could run out one day. A significant acquisition here, a poorly evaluated investment there, a loan that never came back. Each one of those was a piece of the trunk. The 4% rule forces you to live on the returns while preserving the wealth. The lottery creates instant millionaires. The arithmetic is fascinating. Hundreds of thousands of dollars per month without working for the rest of one's life. The principle remains intact. But what the prize does not deliver, alongside the money, is the equipment to manage it, the experience, the network, the judgment that comes from decades of building wealth. It is this gap that explains the cases where the money disappears, not from lack of character, not from irresponsibility, but from the absence of a structure to handle a completely unprecedented situation. And the good news is that you do not need to have all of that equipment. You only need to recognize that you do not have it and act accordingly. Silence, patience, professional guidance, and a withdrawal rule that protects the trunk. That is all that separates those who preserve the fortune from those who return it to the world within a few years. If you made it this far, comment, invest to live. Just comment that, invest to live. When I see your comment, I will know you are a persistent person for staying until the end of the video. Consider subscribing and clicking like. A big embrace, and see you in the next video.